History's biggest unsolved mysteries science still can't explain. Full documentary. In 1872, a ship was found drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. Its cargo was untouched. The captain's breakfast was still on the table. Every crew member was gone, and not one of them was ever seen again. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers fled their tent in the dead of night, barefoot, into -30-degree cold. Some had fractured skulls. Others were missing their eyes and tongue. The Soviet investigation closed with a single haunting phrase: a compelling natural force. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio picked up a signal from deep space, so strong, so precise, that the astronomer who found it circled it on the printout and wrote a single word: "Wow, we have never detected it again." And in the 12th century, 2 children with green skin walked out of a forest in England, speaking a language no one recognized, and said they came from a land where the sun never shines. 4 mysteries. 4 moments where science hit a wall. These are the stories that refuse to be explained. On November 7, 1872, the merchant ship Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy. On board, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 experienced crewmen. The cargo was 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, valuable, volatile, and carefully secured. The ship was in perfect condition. Captain Briggs was known as a cautious, capable commander. The weather forecast was clear. There was no reason to expect anything unusual. 1 month later, on December 4, a British brig called the Dei Gratia spotted something strange. A ship, sails partially set, moving erratically through the water about 400 nautical miles east of the Azores. When the Dei Gratia's crew boarded, they entered a scene that has haunted maritime history for 150 years. The Mary Celeste was completely abandoned, but nothing was out of place. The cargo was untouched. The crew's personal belongings, including valuables, were exactly where they should be. There was a half-eaten breakfast on the table. The captain's logbook, dated 10 days earlier, made no mention of distress. The only things missing were the lifeboat, the ship's chronometer, the sextant, and the navigation papers. And of course, all 10 people. There were 3 feet of water in the hold, not enough to sink a ship of that size, but enough to suggest something had gone wrong. 2 hatches were open, as if someone had tried to ventilate the cargo hold. And a rope, still attached to the ship, trailed into the sea as if the lifeboat had been tethered and the line had snapped. What happened to the Mary Celeste's crew? Over the decades, theories have piled up. Pirates. Nothing was stolen. Mutiny. No sign of struggle. Sea monster. No damage to the hull. The most plausible explanation involves the cargo. Those 1,701 barrels of alcohol were prone to leaking fumes. Captain Briggs was on his first voyage carrying such a dangerous load. A small explosion or vapor leak, even just the fear of one, could have caused him to order everyone into the lifeboat temporarily, tethered to the ship, waiting for the danger to pass. And then, a sudden gust of wind. The rope snaps. The lifeboat drifts away from the ship. 10 people, adrift in the open Atlantic, with a ship they can see but can never reach. It's the best theory we have. But it doesn't explain why there was no explosion damage. It doesn't explain why the captain's log shows no concern. And it certainly doesn't explain why, after 150 years, not a single body has ever been found. The Mary Celeste sailed on without them. It was salvaged, sold, and put back into service for another 12 years before being deliberately wrecked for insurance fraud. But the mystery of what happened to its first crew, that has never been solved. In January 1959, 10 experienced hikers, mostly engineering students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, set out on a winter expedition through Russia's Ural Mountains. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. Their destination was a remote peak called Otor. The trip was rated Category 3, the highest difficulty in Soviet hiking classification. These were not amateurs. On January 28, one hiker, Yuri Yudin, turned back. A flare-up of sciatica made him unable to continue. Before he left, Dyatlov told him they expected to finish around February 12 and would send a telegram. Yudin said goodbye to his friends and walked back to civilization. He was the only survivor. On February 1, the remaining 9 hikers pitched their tent on the slope of a mountain now known as Dyatlov Pass. That night, something happened that caused all 9 of them to flee their tent into the darkness, in temperatures around -30°C. Most of them were in their underwear. Some were barefoot. Nobody knows what it was. When the search party arrived 3 weeks later, they found the tent collapsed and covered with snow. Inside, boots, warm clothing, food, all neatly arranged. The tent had been cut open from the inside. A seamstress later confirmed whoever used that knife was inside the tent, not outside. Footprints led away from the tent, bare footprints, sock footprints, single boot footprints in several groups, heading downhill toward the forest. Some traveled over a kilometer before collapsing. The search party found the bodies in stages. The first 2, Yuri Dorshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, were near the tree line in their underwear beside the remains of a fire. Krivonishenko had burns on his body. He also had a piece of his own knuckle in his mouth. He had bitten it off. 3 more, including Igor Dyatlov, were found between the fire and the tent, positioned as if they had been trying to crawl back. All 5 died of hypothermia, but the remaining 4 bodies weren't found until May, when the snow melted. They were in a ravine under several feet of snow, partially sheltered by what looked like a crude den they had tried to build. And their injuries were different. They weren't hypothermia. Nikolai Thibox-Brignol had a skull fracture so severe there were pieces of bone in his brain. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubinina had crushed chests, the kind of force you'd see in a car crash at high speed. Dubinina was missing her tongue. Zolotaryov was missing his eyes. So was Dubinina. Soft tissue, removed not by animals, because animal predation would look different and the bodies were frozen solid. The Soviet investigation lasted 3 months and ended with a conclusion so vague it has fueled speculation for 65 years. The hikers died from a compelling natural force. But what natural force crushes a woman's ribs like a car accident, while leaving no external bruises? What natural force causes someone to bite off their own knuckle? What makes 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their own tent and run into the snow in their underwear? The theories are numerous. A Soviet weapons test gone wrong. Infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that can induce panic. A katabatic wind, a rare, violent downward wind that could explain the tent evacuation. An avalanche, though the slope was not steep enough and the tent was still standing. And of course, the theory that the Mansi people, indigenous to the region, attacked the hikers for trespassing on sacred land. In 2021, a team of Swiss researchers published a study arguing that a rare type of slab avalanche could indeed have occurred on that slope, even at a shallow angle. It's the closest thing we have to a scientific consensus. But it doesn't explain the missing eyes. It doesn't explain the missing tongue. And it doesn't explain the radiation found on some of the hikers' clothing, a detail the Soviet investigators noted and then buried. The Dyatlov Pass remains open. The mountain has since been renamed. But the question at the heart of it, what made 9 people flee into the cold to die, has never been answered. In 1959, 2 Cornell physicists, Philip Morrison and Giuseppe Cocconi, published a paper that changed how we think about the universe. They argued that if an alien civilization wanted to communicate across interstellar distances, they would use radio waves, and they would likely use a very specific frequency, 1420 megahertz, the frequency at which hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, naturally emits radiation. It's a universal channel, a cosmic front porch. That paper launched SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And for 18 years, nothing. Then came August 15, 1977. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was scanning the sky as usual. It swept across the constellation Sagittarius and recorded a signal. The data was printed out days later, rows of letters and numbers representing signal intensity at different frequencies. A volunteer astronomer named Jerry Amon was reviewing the printout when he came across something that stopped him cold. One line, one frequency. A sequence of characters, 6 EQUJ5 in the scale used by the telescope. The numbers 1 through 9 represented increasing signal strength. After 9 came letters A, B, C, and so on. The U in 6EQJ5 represented intensity between 30 and 31 standard deviations above background noise, 31 times louder than the background hum of the universe. Eamon circled the sequence and wrote one word in the margin: wow. The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, the entire duration that the big ear could observe a single point in the sky before the Earth's rotation moved it out of view. Its frequency was 1420.4556 MHz, almost exactly what Morrison and Cocconi had predicted. The signal rose and fell in intensity exactly as you would expect from a fixed cosmic source moving through the telescope beam. It was narrowband, meaning it wasn't just random noise splattered across the spectrum. It was precise, deliberate looking. And it came from a region of space with no known planets, no known stars with unusual properties, just empty sky. Here's the thing about the WOW signal: it has never repeated, not once. Teams have pointed radio telescopes at that exact patch of sky dozens of times over the decades. Nothing, not a whisper, and that's the problem. A genuine alien transmission, a beacon, would presumably repeat. A one-time burst could be anything, a reflection from space debris. Interstellar scintillation, a natural phenomenon where a distant radio source flickers brightly for a moment due to interference in the interstellar medium. In 2017, one researcher suggested the signal might have come from a hydrogen cloud surrounding a passing comet, but that was later shown to be impossible given the frequency. In 2024, astronomers at Arecibo published new findings suggesting the WOW signal may have been caused by a rare natural astrophysical maser, essentially a cosmic laser amplifying radio waves from a background source. It's compelling, but it's not confirmed, and the specific conditions required for such a maser to form are so rare that it's almost as improbable as aliens. Jerry Eamon himself has always been cautious. He never claimed the WOW signal was proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. He just said it was the strongest candidate we've ever found. And decades later, with far better telescopes and far more computing power, that's still true: one signal, 72 seconds, and we may never know what sent it. We're going back further now to the 12th century, the reign of King Stephen. The village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, named for the deep wolf pits that surrounded it. One summer day during the harvest, villagers discovered two children at the edge of one of those pits, a boy and a girl. They were frightened, disoriented, and they were green. Their skin, their clothes, everything about them seemed to belong to a different world. The children spoke a language no one recognized. They refused all food. The villagers brought them to the home of Sir Richard de Calne, a local landowner, where they were cared for, but for days they would not eat, until someone offered them raw broad beans. The children grabbed the beans desperately, opening the stalks to find the beans inside. For a long time, beans were all they would touch. This is not folklore. The story of the green children of Woolpit was recorded by two independent chroniclers, William of Newburgh, writing in about 1189, and Ralph of Coggeshall, writing in the 1220s. Both were respected historians. Both named their sources. And while their accounts differ in small details, the kind of differences you'd expect from independent witnesses, the core facts align. Over time, the children began to accept other food. Their green skin faded to a normal color. The boy, who seemed younger and weaker, fell ill and died shortly after baptism. But the girl survived, grew healthy, and eventually learned to speak English. And what she said is why this story has survived for 900 years. The girl explained that she and her brother came from a land where the sun never shone, a place of perpetual twilight, where everything was green. She called it St. Martin's Land. She said she and her brother had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a loud, bell-like sound. They followed it, found themselves in a cave, and walked through it until they emerged into blinding sunlight, the light of our world. That's when the villagers found them. The girl stayed. She was said to be very wanton and impudent, a restless, spirited young woman. She worked as a servant in the de Calne household for years. She eventually married, according to some accounts, and lived a normal life. So what really happened? The explanation that has gained the most traction among historians is surprisingly mundane. The children may have been Flemish immigrants. In the 12th century, there were several Flemish settlements near Woolpit. After King Henry II expelled Flemish mercenaries, many fled into the countryside. The children may have been orphans of that conflict, lost, malnourished, speaking a language the English villagers didn't recognize, the green skin. There's a condition called chlorosis, now called hypochromic anemia, caused by severe malnutrition. It can give skin a greenish tint. A diet of nothing but raw beans, the first food the children accepted, fits the profile of someone starving. And the underground land of twilight. A traumatized child, describing the dense, dark forest she and her brother wandered through for days before emerging into the English sun. It's a reasonable explanation, but it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why contemporary chroniclers, respected medieval historians, recorded it as truth. It doesn't explain the specific, consistent detail of St. Martin's Land, a name that appears in both accounts. And it doesn't explain the bells the children said they followed, bells that William of Newburgh specifically compared to the bells of Bury St. Edmund's Abbey. The green children of Woolpit may be a garbled survivor's account. They may be folklore, a story about the fairy world bleeding into ours, or they may be something else entirely. A medieval chronicler writing 800 years ago could not have known this, but modern astronomers have identified real planets, exoplanets, that orbit red dwarf stars where the light is dim and perpetual. Planets where, if life existed, the vegetation might adapt to a different spectrum of light. Planets where everything might, in fact, be green. That's not evidence. It's just interesting. 4 mysteries. 4 moments where the rational world hit something it couldn't explain. We've walked on the moon. We've mapped the human genome. And yet, a ship found empty in 1872 still defies our understanding. 9 hikers who died in 1959 still have no definitive cause of death. A 72-second signal from the stars has never been identified. And 2 children with green skin who walked out of a forest in the 12th century left behind a story that historians still argue about. What connects these 4 cases? Each one sits at the boundary of what we can know. Each one resists the closure that comes with a clean explanation. And maybe that's exactly why we can't look away. We don't tell these stories because we want them solved. Not really. We tell them because we need the reminder there are things out there that are bigger than us, older than us, stranger than us, and some of them may never give up their secrets. But the Mary Celeste isn't the only ship to lose its entire crew without a trace. Next week we're going somewhere even darker. A lighthouse where 3 keepers vanished into thin air in 1900, leaving behind a half-eaten meal, a stopped clock, and a single logbook entry that read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." What happened on Eilean Moor? Subscribe now. You don't want to miss this one.